I stared at the condensation dripping down my craft cocktail, the silence of my apartment a stark contrast to the chaos I grew up in. I moved cross-country and my parents ghosted me. When I started making good money, they texted, "Your brother needs money." We're on our way. They showed up having no idea what they were walking into. For 3 years, my phone had been dead silent. No birthday calls, no holiday check-ins, just a void where a family should be. I had accepted that I was the spare tire. Now, the at 32, I was a senior network architect pulling in $180,000 a year. The my living room overlooked the Austin skyline, a view that cost more than my parents' mortgage. It was a long way from the garage in Michigan, where I ate grocery store cake alone. Because my brother, Trevor, needed the living room for his YouTube channel. Back then, I was just background noise to his inevitable fame. I built my empire in the quiet, grateful that the noise had finally stopped. The silence shattered the weekend my cousin Tanner crashed on my leather sectional. He was passing through Texas and needed a place to sleep, so I let him in against my better judgment. While I was working, Tanner wandered around snapping photos of my exposed brick walls and the high-end espresso machine. He didn't ask permission. He just posted a panoramic shot to Instagram with the caption, "Cousin Kyle is killing it in Austin, levels." I didn't think much of it until the likes started rolling in. That single image acted like blood in the water for sharks. In my family's ecosystem, perceived wealth was a signal to attack. Tanner's post garnered over 400 likes, which in our small town was practically viral fame. The comments started immediately, speculating on my rent and my job title. My mother, who hadn't spoken to me since I packed my truck, commented with 3 heart emojis and a "proud of you." It tasted like gasoline. They didn't miss me. They just smelled the money. Thursday night, my phone vibrated off the coffee table. The family group chat, dormant for 3 years, resurrected itself with violent urgency. First came vague pleasantries from distant aunts, then direct inquiries from my father. "We've been worried." He lied via text. Then came Trevor. "No hello, just a screenshot of my apartment, and must be nice." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold dread pool in my stomach. I knew exactly what was coming next. My finger hovered over the block button. I tapped the screen, severing the digital connection. But the damage was already done. I thought blocking them would restore my peace. A digital wall to match the physical distance I had put between us. I was wrong. A final notification slipped through from an unknown number just as I poured another drink. It was a forwarded flight confirmation email from Delta Airlines. Destination Austin, Bergstrom International. Arrival tomorrow, 10 a.m. They weren't asking for permission to re-enter my life. They were invading it. Saturday morning arrived, with a suffocating humidity that seeped through the glass. I stood in the entryway, watching the security feed on my phone like a hawk. At exactly 11:20 a.m., the buzzer screamed. I didn't buzz them in immediately. I made them wait in the heat for 3 full minutes. When I finally unlocked the deadbolt, my heart wasn't racing with excitement. It was pounding with the steady, Cold rhythm of a soldier preparing for a siege. H. I opened the door but kept my body planted in the frame, blocking the entrance. My mother lunged for a hug, but I stepped back. H. Her smile faltered. Behind her, Dad held a case of cheap soda, and Trevor was typing on his phone. You get 2 hours, I said flatly. H. Not a weekend. 2 hours. Then you leave. Mom looked at Dad, confused by the lack of welcome, but she nodded slowly. H. I checked my watch and stepped aside. They rushed in like water filling a void. Mom didn't look at me. She looked past me. H. Scanning the apartment with the precision of a tax assessor. H. She ran her fingers over the granite countertop and paused at the floor to ceiling windows.
Oh, Kyle!
She breathed. H, but the tone wasn't pride. It was calculation. Trevor bypassed the greetings entirely. He walked straight to the balcony. H, holding his phone up to record the view, framing himself against my success. This must cost a fortune? Mom said. H, finally turning to face me. She was fishing. Downtown Austin isn't cheap. Are you renting? I ignored the question. H, pointing to the coasters as Dad set his sweating soda can on my walnut coffee table. Trevor laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. H. He's clearing 200 grand, easy, Trevor said, dropping onto my leather recliner without asking. Look at this place, H. He's got money to burn while we're scraping by. The air in the room shifted, growing heavy. We were nearing the 2-hour mark, and the pretense of a reunion was dissolving. Dad finally looked away from the television, his face more desperate than I remembered. H. We didn't come just to see the view, he said. The nickname sounded foreign in his mouth. Mom sat on the edge of the sofa. H, clasping her hands tight. Your brother is in a bit of trouble, she whispered. Trevor leaned forward, the arrogance vanishing to reveal panic. It's 75,000, he blurted. Business loans. H. I leveraged things I shouldn't have. He didn't look at me. He looked at my wallet. Mom chimed in, her voice trembling. H. We can't cover it, Kyle. If he doesn't pay by Monday, there are legal consequences. We're family. H. We help each other. The audacity was breathtaking. H. They wanted a huge chunk of my salary to fund the lifestyle that had always overshadowed mine. I looked at my watch. H. The timer on my phone buzzed silently in my pocket. No, I said, standing up. The words sucked the oxygen out of the room. H. Trevor's jaw dropped. What do you mean, no? I walked to the door and held it open. I mean, I'm not your bank. H. And your time is up. I didn't yell. I just pointed to the hallway. They left screaming insults, but I knew the quiet wouldn't last. They didn't go back to Michigan. I assumed the shame of expulsion would send them packing. But I underestimated their desperate delusion. By Sunday night, my phone was a vibrating brick of guilt. Mom sent long, H, scrolling texts detailing every sacrifice she'd ever made, from labor pains to unpaid utility bills. Dad left voicemails that were just heavy breathing and disappointed sighs. They were camped out at a budget motel off the interstate, treating my rejection as a negotiation tactic. I deleted every message without listening. Monday brought a new, professional low. H, my HR director, pinged me on Slack, asking for a quick video call. Her face was sympathetic but firm. Kyle, we had a woman call the main switchboard claiming you are abandoning your elderly parents in a crisis. she said. My stomach turned to lead. She was crying, Kyle. Ish. It was very intense. I had to explain that my family was estranged and attempting extortion. I saved my job, but the humiliation stained the office air like spilled ink. Tuesday evening, I saw the car. It was a silver Nissan Altima, the kind you rent for $30 a day, idling across from my building. I watched from my balcony, 20 floors up. Using a pair of binoculars I usually used for birdwatching. Trevor was behind the wheel, staring up at the glass monolith of my building. He wasn't filming anymore. He was waiting. It wasn't just harassment. It was reconnaissance. I closed the blinds, feeling the safety of my fortress cracking. Wednesday, he tried to get into the lobby. I got the call from the concierge while I was coding. Mr. Vance, a gentleman is here saying he's your brother. He's demanding a key. I checked the lobby camera feed. Trevor was shouting at the security guard, his face flushed and ugly. I am not letting him up. I told the guard. If he doesn't leave, call the police. I watched Trevor get escorted out, kicking a planter on his way. He looked dangerous now. Marissa came over that night, bringing takeout and sanity. She saw the tension in my shoulders before I even spoke. You need a restraining order, she said, feeding a piece of chicken to Zuko. My Malinois mix. They aren't going to stop Kyle. I shook my head, pouring wine. They're broke. They can't afford to stay in Austin another week. They'll run out of gas money and leave. I wanted to believe it. I desperately needed to believe that logic still applied to them. Thursday arrived, and the noise stopped. No texts, no voicemails, no calls to my office. The silver Nissan was gone from the street corner. The sudden quiet was more unnerving than the shouting. It felt like the eye of a hurricane. I checked my phone every 10 minutes, expecting a new barrage, but the screen stayed black. I told Zuko, trying to convince myself. They gave up. They're probably halfway through Arkansas by now. Zuko just whined low in his throat. The relief I felt was a narcotic. Dulling my instincts when I needed them most. I assumed their silence meant retreat, but I should have known better. Desperate people don't just walk away from the only lifeline they think they have. They regroup. They change tactics. They find a lever you haven't guarded. I went to bed early, thinking I had won the war of attrition. I didn't realize that while I was sleeping, they were finalizing the plans for an ambush. Friday evening felt deceptively safe. The humid heat had finally broken, leaving a cool breeze that rattled the oak leaves along our usual route near Lady Bird Lake. Zuko trotted beside me, his nails clicking rhythmically on the pavement, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. I had my headphones in, listening to a podcast about network security, effectively deaf to the world. It was a rookie mistake. I turned the corner onto a dimmer side street, my guard completely down. A figure stepped out from behind a parked utility van, blocking the narrow sidewalk. It was Trevor. He wasn't wearing his usual entrepreneurial suit. He looked disheveled in a stained hoodie. Eyes wide and manic. I ripped my headphones off. Get out of my way, I said, tightening my grip on the leash. Zuko growled. Sensing the threat, his hackles rising in a jagged ridge. Trevor didn't move. He just smiled, a twitchy, nervous expression that made my skin crawl. "We need to talk. Kyle?" Trevor said, his voice cracking. Before I could respond, movement flashed in my peripheral vision. My father lunged from the shadows of a driveway behind me. I expected a hit. But he didn't aim for me. He grabbed Zuko's leash just below my hand and yanked with hysterical strength. The leather burned my palm as it ripped free. Zuko yelped, confused by the sudden aggression from a man he had smelled before but didn't fear. "Dad," I shouted, stepping forward. But Trevor shoved me hard in the chest. I stumbled back against a brick wall, the air leaving my lungs. My father, the man who couldn't even negotiate a car deal, was dragging my 90-pound dog toward the silver Nissan. Zuko was scrambling for traction, whining, looking back at me with terrified eyes.
"Don't follow us!"
Dad yelled. His voice sounding thin and foreign. He looked like a man drowning, willing to pull anyone down with him. Trevor leaned in close, invading my personal space.
"You have 48 hours. He hissed, spittle hitting my cheek.
75 grand. Cash. Or Zuko goes to a guy I know in Houston. He buys working dogs. No questions asked. The threat hung in the air, heavy and sick. "You'll never see him again." He turned and ran to the car. I stood frozen, watching the taillights fade, paralyzed not by fear, but by a sudden, absolute clarity. I didn't chase them. Running after a car on foot was a movie trope, not a strategy. I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, listening to the distant traffic, my hands shaking with a rage that felt like ice water. They had crossed the line from nuisance to enemy combatants. I walked back to my apartment in silence. The empty space where Zuko's water bowl sat hit me harder than a punch. I didn't cry. I went to work. I sat at my desk in the dark, the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my face. I dialed my lawyer's personal cell. "It's an emergency," I said when he answered. "I need a full asset search on my parents. Everything. Mortgages, liens, credit card debt." He asked why. "They stole my dog," I said, my voice steady. "They want to play hardball. I want to know exactly how much they have to lose." The printer hummed to life. Saturday morning dragged by in agonizing slow motion. I sat in my office chair, eyes burning from staring at the screen. The email from my lawyer finally pinged at 9:15 a.m. It was a PDF attached with a simple subject line: "Search results. Urgent." I opened it, scanning past the credit card delinquencies and the predatory car loans. Then I saw it, the golden ticket. My parents weren't just broke, they were drowning. Their mortgage was 3 months behind. Default was imminent. The math was brutal and illuminated everything. They had leveraged their home equity to fund Trevor's drop. Shipping disasters. And now the well was dry. Foreclosure was weeks away, not months. They were desperate for my 75 grand, not just to save Trevor from jail, but to save the roof over their heads. I felt a cold, sharp smile cut across my face. They thought they had leverage because they held my heart. They didn't realize I held their future in my checking account. I called my lawyer back immediately. My voice unrecognizable to my own ears. "Buy it," I said. "Contact the lender. Offer full cash value for the note today." I want the debt assigned to me. He hesitated, warning me about the complexities and the cost, but I cut him off. Shh. I have the liquidity. Make it happen before noon. I spent the next hour transferring funds, moving numbers from savings to escrow. It cost me nearly everything I had, but money was a weapon. At 11:45 a.m., the confirmation came through. The bank was all too happy to offload a toxic asset for liquid cash. Technically, the paperwork would take days to finalize, but the binding agreement was signed. I was now the primary lion holder on the house I grew up in. I owned the garage where I ate my birthday cake alone. I owned the living room where Trevor filmed his lies. I took a deep breath. Picked up my phone and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with forced bravado. We're not changing the terms, Kyle. We need the money by tomorrow or the dog goes. She sounded exhausted. Like she was reading from a script Trevor had written for her. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish her little speech about family obligations and tough love. Are you done? I asked quietly. Because I just got off the phone with your mortgage lender. We need to talk about your housing situation. What are you talking about? She stammered, the confidence vaporizing. I kept my voice incredibly smooth, surgical in its precision. I bought your note, Mom. I bought the foreclosure debt. I own the mortgage now. Silence stretched on the line, heavy and terrified. Here is the new deal. You bring Zuko back to my apartment within 60 minutes unharmed. If you do, we discuss a lease. If you don't, I accelerate foreclosure on Monday. You will be on the street by the end of the month. She tried to argue. Tried to claim I was bluffing, but the specific details I recited about their missed payments shut her up. 1 hour, I said. Tick-tock. I hung up before she could beg. I walked to the window, looking down at the empty street. I wasn't the spare tire anymore. I was the driver. My phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. You are crazy. I didn't reply. I just sent a screenshot of the purchase agreement. The doorbell rang 45 minutes later. I opened the door to find my father standing alone, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. He held Zuko's leash in a trembling hand, staring at the hallway carpet rather than my eyes. Zuko let out a sharp whine and lunged against the collar, scrabbling for traction on the polished concrete. Dad looked wrecked, wearing the same clothes from the abduction. Sweat stained and wrinkled. He didn't offer an apology. He didn't offer a defense. He simply held out the leather loop like a peace offering, expecting it to be enough to erase the last 48 hours. I snatched the leash before he could change his mind, dropping to my knees. Zuko slammed into my chest. A 90-pound missile of relief, licking my face and whining in high-pitched bursts. I buried my hands in his fur, checking for injuries, feeling the rapid staccato of his heart against my ribs. He was thirsty and terrified, but he was whole. My father cleared his throat, a pathetic sound meant to initiate a conversation. I didn't look up. I stood slowly, tethering Zuko to my belt, and finally met the old man's gaze. We didn't want to do it. Dad mumbled, his voice cracking. Trevor said it was the only way to get you to listen. I ignored the excuse entirely. I reached onto the entry table and picked up a thick manila envelope I had prepared while waiting. I thrust it into his chest. H. He instinctively grabbed it, looking confused. "This isn't a negotiation," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "H. This is the reality of your new life. You aren't homeowners anymore. You are tenants. H. And I am the landlord who owns the roof over your heads." He opened the envelope with shaking fingers. H. Pulling out the standard residential lease agreement my lawyer had drafted. His eyes scanned the bold text at the top, widening as he reached the monthly figure. 1,900? He choked out. "Kyle, we can't afford this." H. The mortgage was only 1,200. I crossed my arms, blocking the entry to my home. H. That's market rate for a 3-bedroom in your zip code, I said coldly. "Actually, I am being generous. I didn't include a pet deposit for Hudson. You have until Monday to sign, or I start eviction." "Were your parents?" he whispered. H. The entitlement finally replaced by fear. "You can't treat us like strangers." I laughed, a harsh bark that made Zuko flinch. H. "Strangers wouldn't have kidnapped my dog," I countered. "You used my love for this animal as leverage." H. You taught me that everything is transactional, so let's be transactional. I pointed to the document in his hands. H. You were 3 weeks from losing that house to the bank anyway. I just bought the debt. Now you pay me, or you leave. H. It is terrifyingly simple. He looked around the hallway, hoping for an audience or an intervention. But there was only the silent judgment of the security camera above my door. He pulled a pen from his pocket. H. The same cheap plastic one he used for crosswords, and braced the paper against the wall. I watched him sign his name. H. It wasn't a surrender of war. It was an admission of total defeat. He handed the papers back to me, his hand shaking so badly the paper rattled. "Are we done?" he asked. "Yes," I said. H. Get out of my building. I closed the door and locked it, engaging the deadbolt with a satisfying click. The adrenaline crashed. H. Leaving me exhausted, but I forced myself to move. I walked to my desk and scanned the signed lease. H. Uploading it immediately to a cloud server. I created a new account on a property management platform, inputting their names as occupants. I set up automated payment reminders and late fee triggers. I wasn't going to call them for rent. I wasn't going to text. They were just data points now, rows in a spreadsheet that needed to balance. They drove back to Michigan the next morning. I tracked their progress not by asking H, but by watching the security alerts on the smart doorbell I had installed on my new property remotely. H. They arrived to a house that was no longer theirs, unlocking a door that I controlled. The power dynamic had shifted tectonically. They were living on borrowed time, and they knew it. I spent the next week quietly detaching myself from the anger. Anger was messy. Being a landlord was clean. It was just business, contracts, and consequences. Trevor couldn't help himself. 2 weeks later, H, a text popped up on my phone. You think you won something? You just bought a headache. Have fun paying property taxes on a dump. He was trying to regain some scrap of superiority. H, pretending that my financial intervention was a burden rather than a guillotine hanging over his neck. He didn't understand the game. He thought I bought the house to save them, to be the hero. H. He didn't realize I bought the house so I could be the one to legally throw them out. I didn't respond to his taunt. H. I simply logged into the management portal and checked the payment status for the upcoming month. The rent was due on the 1st, H, with a strict 5-day grace period. Late fees kicked in automatically at midnight on the 6th. Eviction notices were drafted and ready to file on the 10th. I sat back in my chair, scratching Zuko behind the ears, H, and watched the calendar. I wasn't hoping they would pay. Deep down, I was praying they wouldn't. H. I was just waiting for the excuse to finish this. The first month, they scraped the rent together by selling old tools and jewelry. Shh. I saw the deposit hit my account and felt a grim satisfaction. But habits are harder to break than leases. On the 1st of November, the portal remained empty. At 9 a.m. on the 2nd, my mother texted, Trevor needed help with legal fees. We'll have it next week. It was exactly what I expected. They had prioritized the golden child over their own shelter again. Shh. I didn't reply. I just logged the violation. The automation software was ruthless, doing the dirty work I refused to do personally. At midnight on the 5th, the system tacked on a $100 late fee and generated a formal notice to pay or quit. It was emailed to them and mailed via certified post. My phone exploded with notifications almost instantly. 12 missed calls from Dad. A string of hysterical texts from Mom begging for mercy. I silenced the device and put it in the drawer. The silence in my apartment was heavy, purchased with their panic. 10 days later, I instructed my attorney to file for eviction. He warned me it would be ugly, but I told him to proceed with maximum speed. The process server caught my father in the driveway, handing him the court summons while the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Dad reportedly dropped the papers in the mud, staring at them like they were a death certificate. They had expected me to fold. They expected the family card to work one last time. They didn't realize that card had expired. Trevor tried a different tactic as the court date approached. He sent threatening emails to my work address, claiming I was abusing the elderly. He tried to dox me on social media, posting my address and calling me a slumlord. My company's security team flagged the posts and had them removed within an hour. Instead of intimidating me, he just gave me more ammunition. I forwarded every screenshot to my lawyer. Add harassment to the file, I said, and see if we can expedite the writ. The court hearing was a formality they didn't even attend. They had no defense, no money for counsel, and too much shame to stand before a judge. Default judgment was entered at 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The writ of possession was issued immediately, giving them 72 hours to vacate the premises. My property manager texted me the update. Sheriff scheduled for Friday morning.
Do you want to be there?
I looked down at Zuko sleeping by my feet. No, I typed back. Just send me the photos. I watched the end of their era through the doorbell camera I still controlled. It was raining in Michigan. A cold, gray drizzle that soaked everything. 2 sheriff's deputies banged on the door, their knuckles loud against the wood. My father answered, looking frail and defeated in a bathrobe. There was no shouting, no dramatic resistance. Just a quiet pathetic resignation. They were given 10 minutes to gather essentials. They walked out carrying trash bags filled with clothes, looking like refugees of their own making. The eviction crew arrived next, efficiently stripping the house of 30 years of accumulation. My childhood sofa, the dining table, the boxes of Trevor's unsold inventory, it all went to the curb. It was a mountain of wet, sad debris piling up on the lawn. The neighbors, people who had known my parents for decades, stood on their porches and watched. The humiliation was total. Mom sat in the passenger seat of their old sedan, weeping into her hands, unable to look at the wreckage of her life. Then came the final twist of the knife, orchestrated by fate rather than me. Trevor's BMW was parked on the street because the driveway was blocked by the eviction truck. A tow truck turned the corner. Its amber lights flashing in the gloom. The repo man didn't hesitate. He hooked the luxury car in seconds, dragging it away while Trevor screamed from the sidewalk. He chased it for half a block, slipping on the wet pavement. He was left standing in the rain, bankrupt and broken. The property manager did the walkthrough an hour later. The photos he sent were grim. They had left garbage everywhere and taken the light bulbs, a petty act of vandalism. Trevor had punched a hole in the drywall of his old bedroom. It didn't matter. I approved the cleaning crew and the painter immediately. Get it, Market. Ready by Monday? I told the manager. I felt strangely light, as if the house had been exorcised. The physical structure remained, but the ghosts that haunted it were finally gone. By the time the sun set in Austin, the locks in Michigan were changed. My parents and brother were somewhere in the wind, likely crowding into a cheap motel room. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt the tug of biological obligation. But as I walked Zuko to the park, breathing in the warm Texas air, I felt nothing but relief. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stopped saving them from themselves. The cycle was broken. The house was just an asset now. 8 months of silence passed before the text came. It wasn't a threat this time, just a beggar's plea for coffee. I met Trevor at a hipster spot on South Congress, a place where his old designer clothes would have fit right in. Now, he looked like a ghost haunting the patio. He sat hunched over a cold brew he probably couldn't afford, wearing a shirt that had seen too many wash cycles. I didn't feel the old spike of adrenaline. I just felt like I was late for a meeting with a stranger. I sat down without shaking his hand. Trevor flinched, his eyes darting to my wrist where a new watch sat. Thanks for coming, he said, his voice raspy. I didn't think you would. I placed my phone on the table, screen down. You have 10 minutes, I said. Make them count? He nodded frantically, looking thinner than I remembered. His hands shook as he reached for his cup. The arrogance that had fueled his entire life was gone, burned away by the friction of actual consequences. I am sorry, he blurted out, tears welling up instantly. About Zuko. About the money. About everything. It was the apology I had fantasized about for years, the total capitulation of the golden child. He told me about the shelter, about Mom working retail at 63, about Dad's minor heart attack. H. He laid their misery out like a buffet, expecting me to feast on it or fix it. H. I listened to the laundry list of tragedies and waited for a spark of empathy. It never ignited. H. Hudson asks about you, Trevor whispered, playing his final card. He misses his Uncle Kyle. We thought maybe we could just start over? No money. Just family. He looked up, hope naked in his eyes. H. He actually believed that time erased the crime. He thought the blood bond was a bungee cord that would always snap me back. Ish. I looked at him and saw the man who threatened to sell my dog. That wasn't family. That was a predator who simply lost his teeth. I stood up, pushing my untouched coffee away. No, I said softly. The word hit him like a physical blow. H. We aren't starting over because there is nothing to restart. Trevor opened his mouth to argue, to beg, but I raised a hand. You aren't my brother, Trevor. H. You are just a guy who shares my DNA and owes me rent money. The brutality of the truth hung between us. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The ledger was balanced, and the account was closed. I walked out into the bright Austin sunshine. H. Leaving him weeping at a table for two. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Marissa asking if I wanted tacos for dinner. H. I typed, yes, and deleted Trevor's number for the last time. I didn't look back at the coffee shop. H. The guilt I had carried for decades had evaporated, leaving only a clean, quiet space. I headed home to my dog and the life I built. H. Finally understanding that the only family that matters is the one you choose.